Hello creeps, Anna here, and I had to change the settings around and stuff, so let me know how things look on your end. I'm just not good with this stuff, so we'll see how it looks. But today I have my reading wrap up for October, and we're actually for once getting caught up with videos. That's crazy. So I'm excited to talk about what I read last month. Oh no, sorry, for September. Man, it was just one good book after another. So I'm really excited to talk about these. And even this month, these books that I'm reading, oh, they're so great. Some of these will be recommended in upcoming videos too. I read some of my favorite books last month. So let's just kind of jump in. Let's get started. All right, first up. The very first book that I read was Karen Slaughter's Pretty Girls. This seems to be a lot of people's favorite thrillers, or the thriller that they find like the most disturbing and stuff. It's about a woman who goes missing. Well, a young girl, she's like a teen. And it's more sad than anything. I mean, it's messed up too, but it is just how each family member handles the grief when the young girl goes missing in their family. And that alone is terrible, and how it just kind of destroys the family and destroys these kids' lives. It goes on from there. I don't think the back really says anything. Yeah, I think that's kind of all that it says on the back. So there's a lot more to the story than that. I don't want to give anything away. But yeah, it's more just, to me, it was a really sad story and just like an examination of grief on the family's part. It is pretty dark for a thriller. Although I don't think I find it as messed up as other people do. And don't get me wrong, I am desensitized. I read a lot of horrible stuff. So I was reading it like, yeah, okay, I get it. It's probably darker than some thrillers are, but I didn't think it was like that crazy. I don't know, maybe I just have a problem. I liked that not every question was answered in the book, and not everything was spelled out for you. Not everything was crystal clear. There were definitely some things that you had to come to your own conclusions with, and I like when writers do that. I like when writers have enough faith in their audience and that they've done a good enough job storytelling that they can, with confidence, rely on you to determine what happened in the story and not spell it out for you. You know how sometimes there's those books where the last 5 pages are like, and then this is exactly how I did it. And you're like, all right, calm down. Those I don't like as much. So I really did appreciate that about this book. I also think that the shining part of this novel was the character development. Each character felt three-dimensional and felt like their own person. And I really liked that. So yeah, I enjoyed this one. This was a solid like 4-star read for me, but I will definitely read more of her books. And I think she actually does have another book that came out this year that I think I will get on Audible and listen to at least. This is Pigtails, a novel of lust and transformation. I do not know how to pronounce this woman's name. I apologize, but this is the second book that I read this month. Okay, this is a weird one. I'm not gonna lie. It's a weirdo. It's about this woman who gets a job at a cosmetic shop, but they start like giving massages and other things to their clients. And she begins to gain weight and nobody's really paying attention to her, and she thinks she might be pregnant. And then she starts experiencing weird symptoms, like her skin's growing in pinker, and she wants to eat raw potatoes and flowers and roll around in the grass. She's basically slowly transforming into a pig. And her clients start having odd requests, and when she goes to her boss to explain her discomfort with that, he just calls her a little girl and just basically tells her to deal with it. Basically, everyone just uses her for her body and takes from her. And then when she begins to want sexual relations with men, the men get like disgusted at her. It's just a really interesting portrayal of sex and women and how women are perceived in society. And that's kind of what I thought the whole book would be about. But honestly, there's some political elements in there as well, which kind of threw me off and I was not expecting. It was an interesting read. It is weird, certainly. And it is kind of told in that stream of consciousness, kind of just following her in her everyday life way. And I don't love stories like that. You guys know it's hard for me to follow along when it's just, you know, a pig walking around talking about what she's doing in her everyday. So it's not my favorite way of writing, but I did think that the underlying themes were interesting. This one I gave like a 3.5. It was a pretty you know, middle of the road. I felt like there were pros and cons with it, but I did think it was an interesting examination of women in society and especially revolving around sex. So I'm glad I read it. It's been on my shelf for a while. Glad I read it, but certainly wasn't my favorite book of the month. Next up, I read Mexican Gothic. Oh my God. I absolutely adored this. This is by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. You guys, this book was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. Dang it, I always leave my bookmarks in here. It's a little planchette bookmark. That's cute. Okay, so this is about a woman. She's kind of like higher society, her family's well known, and her cousin has since married some man who swept her away to some giant castle somewhere. Manor is probably a better word for it. Swept her away to some manor. The cousin starts writing letters and saying some odd things that's kind of weirding the family out. And the dad is like, hey, why don't you go try to see what's going on, see if she needs some maybe intervention, some mental health assistance or something. Just go and try to help her out. And so she's like, yeah, of course, you know. So this takes place in Mexico, Mexican Gothic, but there is some like English influence, especially with the house and stuff. It's explained in the story why. So she gets up there and oh my gosh, you guys, the atmosphere of this book is unreal. It is unreal. It is so atmospheric. Oh, I could eat it. Oh, I could eat the atmosphere in this book. It's so good. The setting really is a character in itself. And I do hear some people say that with other stories, but with this one, my God, it is so true. The house becomes a character in the story. It's so atmospheric and subtly creepy. And I'm starting to think that those are the books that I prefer more. The ones that are more like in your face, I find less creepy than kind of like the background eerie ones. And so this one I just thought was fantastic. You have this large manor, you have the fog rolling in, the candlelight. Oh gosh, they're isolated on a big hill. It's just so perfect. You also have a very creepy premise where, you know, she's going to try to help her cousin who's having obviously some sort of mental health crisis, and her in-laws are being very weird, kind of keeping her away from her cousin, saying and doing weird things, and she can't really get anyone to take her seriously or to pay attention to her or to like go along with what she thinks is the best for her cousin. But at the same time, her cousin has a husband, and obviously it's his say in what actually happens to her. So yeah, I don't know, creepy premise, really, really awesome. Loved the main character. I loved the main character. I loved her attitude. I loved her. She's like posh, but she doesn't look down on people and she doesn't think she's better than anyone, but she does obviously come from a different background than a lot of the other characters. And it just makes her a certain way, but she also, I think, is used to getting her ways in some capacity because she's very like argumentative and she doesn't take no for an answer, but it's not in like an annoying entitled way. It's more of a like, well, no, I'm going to question. I'm not just going to sit down and let you do what you're going to do. I want answers. I want to know what's going on. I want to know why you won't listen to me. And I just loved her. Definitely more under the surface, but I'm worried that I'll give too much away if I talk more about it. But yeah, the characters, the setting, the spooky atmosphere, absolutely loved it. Could not put this one down. I was like, is this the best book of the year? And then I ended up reading the next one. Well, I guess before that, I will say I did listen to The Women by Kristen Hanna. This is about women in the Vietnam War, and it follows one specific character named Frankie, how her family handles her going to the war. She's a nurse in the war, how nurses are treated in the war, how they're not really treated as somebody who's witnessed anything traumatic, even though they're, you know, just the most graphic. It's so funny because everyone's like, oh man, I don't like horror books. Horror books are so this and that. And then I read this book. I'm trying to eat lunch while I'm listening to it. I'm like taking a bite of food. It's like, and then the gangrene smelled so bad. I'm like, are you serious right now? I just think it's funny that some fiction books or even some thrillers are like way more gross than some of the horror books that I read. Like this, there's nothing really bloody about it. It's just creepy and, you know, fun. But then there's books like this where you're just like, God damn. This one, it's a great book, obviously. It talks about the effects of war on both the soldiers and also the nurses and the doctors who had to witness it all. What happened when people came home from the Vietnam War, how even people who came home in different tours experienced the war differently and were received by the public differently, which I found very interesting. I guess I never really considered nurses and doctors in the time of war, so I think it's a great book. I don't personally love sad stories. I don't personally love things that, you know, it's historical fiction, but could potentially happen that are, you know, embedded in real life. And this girl, geez, just one thing after another, and you're like, can she get a break? Hey, universe, can you give her a break, please? It was a rough read, I'm not gonna lie. So it wasn't my favorite book, but does it deserve 5 stars? Yeah, you know, it was a great book. So after reading Mexican Gothic, I'm like, well, that was my favorite book of the year. And then I read Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson. Oh my God, I loved this book. I cannot even tell you how much I love this book. This is the one that's about the girl who gets attacked on Halloween. She's alone. She's like in her 20s, early 20s, and she gets attacked, and they find that she has some issues with her brain, and she will have an aneurysm within the next week or so, and she will succumb to that aneurysm. So you know from the beginning what's going to happen in the story. And she's kind of a person that's always put things off and always been like, I'll do it tomorrow, later, a procrastinator. And she has her reasons for doing that too within the story. But when she learns that she's gonna die from this aneurysm, she's like, well, I'm gonna do one thing. I'm gonna fulfill one thing. I'm gonna finish one thing in my life, and I will find out who killed me. And so she ends up not really trusting the people around her and digging into what happened on Halloween, what happened that night, and putting things together. And man, the story is way more than I expected it to be. And it's not just a fun story, although it is that too. This was a perfect blend of just heartbreak and humor. It made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me question my own existence and what I'm doing with my own life. I loved the main character. I loved her so much. I connected with her in so many ways. I loved that she kept her humor and you know, that was kind of her coping mechanism with dealing with this stuff. But she also was slowly coming to terms with what was happening and like really trying to right the wrongs. And I just loved this book. I loved the whodunit aspect of it, the hunting for clues for your own murder. What a cool concept for a story. I love the message behind it, to stop putting things off, to not get so carried away, to, you know, live in the moment, to live the life you want. You only get one life, and, you know, tomorrow's not guaranteed, all that good stuff. I thought it had a great message underlying it. This book also just is, you know, it's a tearjerker for sure. I cried really hard reading this. But this is, and also the cover is beautiful. I had never read Holly Jackson books before. I guess she's a very popular author. She writes thrillers, which is probably why I hadn't heard of her. But I immediately after reading this one went and bought a YA book from her. Do you see that cat here? Because I loved this one so much. So highly recommend. I mean, I could not put this one down. I really could not. And I was like, okay, that's my new favorite book of the year. And I'm like, nothing will come close to that. Well, I read Allhallows Eve by Richard Lehman. I did talk about this one, did I not? Yeah, in the last video that I did. It's about this murder house in town. There was like a murder that was never solved there. And then one Halloween, all the kids are invited to a party there and no one knows who's throwing it, blah, blah, blah. This book is so crude. It's so crude. I mean, there is so much talk of boners. So many boners throughout the story. Just like boners on every page. It's a very crude book. Like I said, I didn't hate the story. Really liked the first like 70% of the book. The ending did feel a bit rushed, and there wasn't really a conclusion for a lot of the characters. It just felt like Richard Lehman got to the end and he's like, oh my gosh, not enough women were tortured in this book. Okay, let's just put it all in the end. So yeah, it's a weird one. It wasn't my favorite story, but it's a quick read, and like, you know, would I read it again sometime? Yeah, sure. Not my favorite, not my least favorite. So I read Mexican Gothic. I read Not Quite Dead Yet, and I'm like, surely no other book will compare to these. And then, you guys, I read Blood on Her Tongue by Johanna Van Veen. Oh my god, this book was So good. This book was so good. Oh my god, it was so good. It was so good. It's interesting because this one and Mexican Gothic have kind of some things that seem similar when I'm going to tell you the plot of this one, but they go in very different directions. So this one again is about a woman whose twin sister is experiencing some, it seems like, mental health concerns, and that has been something that has happened in their family. So she goes to be with her twin sister during this challenging time and learns there's more to the story than she originally thought. Whereas Mexican Gothic, and I guess a lot of Gothic tales in general, do kind of lean more on the atmosphere and the location than anything. This one, surprisingly, leaned a lot more on plot, so they really do kind of go in very different directions. There's a lot under the surface in this one. You definitely have like power dynamics, and even within the twin sisters, like you have a dominant twin and a more submissive twin. And also there are questions of like how far you would go for the ones that you loved. And it's also not lost on me the aspect of madness, especially when dealing with some sapphic characters in the story. So I thought that that was interesting, like her, like, well, I guess I won't say who, but like someone that they knew. There's so much atmosphere to this book, but yeah, it's less to do with the location, like in Gothic stories, and it's much more to do with what happens. So basically they dig up this bog woman. They live on this bog, and they dig up this bog woman who has like, you know, a rock in her mouth and has been nailed to the earth and stuff like that. There's definitely some ambiguity where you're like, okay, does this bog woman have some sort of influence on the sister, or is this some sort of genetic thing? There's, you know, madness in their family. So it's left up to interpretation to a certain extent, I think. But the bog woman, all of the descriptions of the bog woman, I found so, again, it's just eerily creepy. It's not in your face. It's not over the top. It's not on every page. But the things that take place in this book are creepy. It is creepy. I absolutely loved this one. I loved the descriptions in this book. I loved the horror. I loved the way that twins were portrayed. A lot of times in horror books, the mention of twins, I'm always giving it a side eye. Because if you didn't know, my mom is a twin sister. My mom and my aunt were twin sisters, identical twins. So I grew up with identical twins. And a lot of times when they're portrayed in books, you're like, come on, that is not, you've never met a twin before, you know? And I loved the way the twins were in this book. And I thought, man, this girl, she knows something about twins. They're each fully rounded 3D characters within themselves, but they also still need each other to be whole. She did such an amazing job with the twin aspects of it. And then I read in the back, she's a triplet. And what's crazy, it says that she's a triplet and her sisters are twin sisters. What are the odds that you would have? So that would mean that 2 eggs got fertilized and then 1 split, right? What are the odds of that? That's crazy. What a unique experience growing up like that. So anyways, I was like, okay, that's why she did such a great job. I mean, it really did remind me a lot of my mom and my aunt because they're so different, but also like part of each other, you know what I mean? I loved the bog bodies, and you have like licking blood and eyeballs and body horror. Oh gosh, it's so good. It's very good. This one I guess is a little bit more intense than like Mexican Gothic. That one's a little bit less subtle. This one, there are definitely creepy scenes and the body horror does ramp up and there is blood and guts. But yeah, loved this one. Oh my god, I thought this was such a fantastic book. I absolutely loved this one. Next, I read Breathe In, Bleed Out by Brian McAuley. This is the author of Candy Cane Kills. I read that book last year. That's just like a fun Christmas slasher. This one is about a girl who's dealing with grief, the loss of her fiance after a tragic accident, and she's trying to regain her life back again, but she's definitely having some issues with her own, you know, like substances and things like that, and pushing people away and isolating herself. And so she's really trying to step out of that and forgive herself for what's happened and accept it and move on. So she ends up going on this retreat that her friend invites her on, and it's supposed to be relaxing, but it is anything but. This one kind of feels a little like Bloody Valentine-ish. There's miners and lore of this town, and people begin being picked off one by one. And this one is just one of those ones where it feels like you're reading a horror movie. It's just kind of like sit back, eat some popcorn, read the bloody scenes. It's fun. It's a fun time. I thought that this was a fun one. The next one that I read well, we read it because this was our book club pick of the month, was A Certain Hunger by Chelsea Summers. This is about a girl who's a food reviewer, and you learn pretty quickly in the book that she's in prison and is a cannibal and has murdered a bunch of people. It's interesting because a lot of the times when you have, for example, cannibalism in stories, especially something like horror, it's used as the climax. It's used as the most pinnacle part of the story to gross you out, to draw you in. But this one starts with death and detainment, and it goes back and forth. So you know in the beginning what happened. So she'll be like, oh yeah, I killed this guy, I ate his tongue. Let me explain what happened. Like, it's not like a normal arc of a story. You know what I mean? Like, it's very like, oh yeah, this is just what happened and then da da da. It's a really interesting, unique read in that way. And it was almost, boring isn't the right word, but, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It was told so mundanely, where you're just like, oh yeah, there was a murder, I ate his tongue. So my childhood, and you're like, oh, okay, you know? And it was, I think, intentionally written to be mundane and not kind of sensationalized the way that a serial killer typically would be in a horror story. So wow, what an interesting read. I will say that because it was written like that though, I couldn't sit down and read this for 3 hours. You know, it wasn't a book that I really got sucked into. I enjoyed the read, but it wasn't one that I couldn't put down. Great quotes in here. Really great quotes all over the book. I really did highlight a lot. The main character was really interesting. She talks about being a psychopath, and again, very different, like unsensationalized view of a psychopath. Very different than what we typically have in horror stories. And she keeps like files of blackmail on everyone she meets. And she has such a lack of emotion with everything. She's such an interesting character. We talked about this one a lot on the live stream, so I won't go too into it. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting read. Different than what I was expecting, for sure. The next one that I read was this Poison Apple Crisp. We're getting into fall in Allhallow, my favorite time of year. Again, there's a murder. Again, Lottie Lemon solves it. Again, it's book 25 and there's still a fucking love triangle between these people. I swear she must have the most magical... Anyway, it's silly. Like, I know it's silly, but I love it. I will return to Allhallow every month. The next thing that I read was The Pram by Joe Hill. This is a group of, I think it's like 7 or 8 short horror stories by different horror authors, and they're all on Kindle Unlimited, so you can read them for free if you have Kindle Unlimited. So someone mentioned this on Discord and I was like, ooh, I want to read those. This one was a good story. I was really impressed by how much he fit into such a short story. It really did feel like such a well-rounded, like almost, I mean, you got more out of this than sometimes you do in a whole novel. So I was very impressed with the writing of this one. But it does deal with pregnancy loss, and this book specifically, not only how that experience affects the mother, but the father as well. They move to a new town and they're given a pram to take home groceries in by the local guy. He's like, oh, you could just take that. And he starts kind of thinking that noises that are coming from it is his baby. And the story continues from there. It's a spooky little story. Again, it's more, you know, more sad than anything. There's, you know, it's not for, this one won't be for everyone, especially if you have sensitivities to things like that. I would avoid this one. But I thought the storytelling around it was very good. The last one that I read was Ankle Snatcher by Grady Hendrix. This is the second in the Little Monsters series. And this is just about a man whose father killed his mother and went to jail for it. But before he left, he told his son to never get down off the bed without a light on because the monsters will get them. And so he comes to find out that his father wasn't crazy, and that does happen. And it's a really quick, short story. Not really like The Pram, where there's a whole lot underneath the surface. This one's very like surface level, just spooky monster kind of thing. This one was fine. Again, just like probably like a 3.5 typical horror book. But I'm excited to read the rest of the monster series. And there you have it, folks. Those are the books that I read. My goodness. I think my favorite was still Not Quite Dead Yet. I really loved that book. And then Blood on Her Tongue and Mexican Gothic are way, way up there too. My least favorite was probably the Pigtails one, or maybe it was All Hallows Eve. I don't know. I'm not sure about my least favorite. And then I'll have some video recommendations for fall reads next video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon with another horror video. Bye! Also, let me know if this looks bad or not. I can't tell.